Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Ask an Addiction Specialist. I'm Bob Weathers, and happy to welcome you for today's special guest presentation, which I'll be introducing in just a moment. I want to thank you for coming back to join us. I want to thank our in-house producers, Austin Armstrong and Odie Martinez, are with us today. You're used to Odie sitting next to me, and I'll introduce this gentleman in just a second. Odie is handling part of the production today, and Austin's handling the other. I want to recommend that you feel free to write to us. Austin and or Odie will be our moderators today. So as we go through our co-presentation today, your comments, your questions are invited, and my guest and myself will do our best to answer your questions. Our topic is addiction recovery. My background is a recovery coach, as you know. My background's in psychology, and I bring that orientation. Last week, we talked about restoring hope in recovery. In fact, that was part 2, looking at how it is that from a psychological perspective, hope is a critical factor in recovery. It's a critical factor in psychotherapy writ large, and especially in regards to battling one of the topics we've been discussing a lot through this series, which is battling shame. In fact, that hope has the capacity of trumping shame and replacing it. So I can't think of any better exponent of hope than the man sitting next to me. I want to introduce him here, and then we're going to dive into a free-for-all. This is Paul Bartlau. He's a dear friend of mine for the last half a dozen years of my own recovery. We've met each other in different contexts, including his coming to a university class of mine and presenting and wowing the students. These are all psychology students that were taking a course on substance abuse treatment. Paul came in and left a very deep impression, positive impression with my students. I've gotten to know Paul in lots of different contexts. I'm grateful for our friendship all these years. The latest collaboration has been working with what's referred to as the Muran method, which is a kind of a comprehensive body, mind, spirit approach to detox from addiction on the way to healing. And Paul's going to be talking into that today, and I'll be joining him. Paul's special expertise that I hope to invite you're talking into with us today, Paul, is in the early process of recovery, including in detox, engaging with 12-step resources, 12-step group support resources, and the resources contained within that organization, which include very much of a holistic body, mind, spirit perspective. I'm going to leave that to discuss with Paul. Paul, I'm happy to have you here. People are going to be submitting questions as we go along. Let's dive in and let's just see what we come up with today. Okay, my friend?
What a wonderful place to begin. It was a pleasure to see you, and thank everyone for creating this opportunity for us to talk to the world.
Really happy about that.
Something that's pretty near and dear to me.
Yeah, it is.
I'll give you a little bit of background and then some overview of how Paul sees the world.
I'd love to hear that. That sounds good to me.
And it's not a matter of, how do you put it, defining what someone else has said or written. It is my experience with being on this planet without changing how I feel with a drink or a drug. That being said, let's see here. Last Friday was 30 years of sobriety for me. And that...
That's awesome.
And 28 and a half years without freebasing nicotine, which is a slang term that I use for smoking cigarettes. I value life.
Good for you. Yes, you do.
I value life naturally without changing how I feel with a drink or a drug. And that being said, that's defined without condition. You know, it's okay to hurt. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to be excited. It's okay to be. When I first was being told that maybe I drink too much and, you know, you need to stop, you might be an alcoholic, etc. Coincidentally, I drank with a professor of psychiatry at the local university. So I went to happy hour and I said, Doc, people are saying that I drink too much and maybe I'm this and that and whatever, and they're saying that maybe I'm an alcoholic. You know, what do you think? And he looked at me in all sincerity and said, you know something, Paul, it doesn't make any difference what anybody else thinks. It doesn't make any difference what anybody else says, for that matter, what I say. The question is, what do you think? And I said, I think I'll have another drink. So I had a few more drinks, for that matter, another year or so, until I drank the value out of drinking. That's what I had to do. That is my true experience, and up to this point, that's held true. And the way
That's one of my favorite phrases of yours. I want you to know that. I drank the value out of drinking.
I did.
I've heard you say that in several contexts, and I just love that. That cuts right to the chase.
The way it occurred was this. I spent a year going through every bar, every watering hole, you know, the connectivity with my fellow man, all the different people that I met, until I ended up in a bar in Newport Beach, California. It was 4:30 on a Monday afternoon. I looked in the mirror of the bar and I looked at myself and I said, I can't do this anymore. From where that came, I can't tell you, but that's what occurred. I had a broken leg, a black eye. I was an emotional basket case, and I went to my first AA meeting and I was drunk. And some kind people invited me into the community, so I went to
that word.
A free detox center in Dana Point, California, that overlooked Dana Point Harbor. And I didn't know which way was up, so I entered into a very close personal relationship with a gentleman by the Mike V and Lori. And what we did was we played gin and overlooked Dana Point Harbor while everybody else was doing everything that they were doing. And during that period of time, I had the opportunity to experience physical sobriety. I questioned what everybody else was saying and doing, the methodology that was being proposed, those that came and told everybody how I needed to do what I needed to do. And I remember thinking, we'll see. Seriously. So I ended up, I left that and went home. I had an apartment here in Newport Beach. And I went to a few Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and that's where the magic started. And here's what it is for me. It's a true statement on page 89 in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Nothing will ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with another alcoholic. It works when everything else fails. That's the first sentence on page 89 in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I like that statement because it was a definitive. It didn't say it was out of research or out of medical verification. It was practical experience. Their practical experience showed that one alcoholic interacting with another supported the not drinking, the physical part, which I dearly needed. I was so uncomfortable. I'd sit in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. I'd be a fidgeter. At that time, I smoked. I smoked my brains out. And a kind gentleman sat next to me and he said, you know something, Paul? It's okay to be you. And I heard it.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, it is okay to be me. You know, and everybody else was doing what they needed to do. And that physical base of not drinking one day at a time and taking the responsibility for that to have value. Because I was being told that it's not about not drinking, it's about everything else we're doing. And I said, wait a minute, then it's backwards for me. It's all about not drinking. To begin with, how do I accomplish that?
Yes.
And it was, unbeknownst to me, the informality of being able to be transparent with another human being. That being said, the applaud and the congratulations for not drinking for a 30-year period, you know, it seems, here we go, the operative word is seems, that we've created a PR problem. And the PR problem is that if you happen to be an alcoholic or an addict, then you're a liar, a cheat, and a thief. Yeah. And the reason for that during the course of my time in Alcoholics Anonymous is to make sure that the lowest common denominator hears it, that everybody's welcome. There are no exclusions.
I do.
Therefore, we've taken it down to the very core.
Yeah.
If you're a liar, a cheat, a thief, whoever you are, you're welcome.
You're still welcome.
It's turned out to be that because you're an alcoholic, you're a liar, a cheat, and a thief. That's kind of a misnomer, and that's the way it's created. So who wants to be an alcoholic when you're a liar, cheat, and a thief? I don't want to tell the world or whatever. The reason for anonymity.
It's backfired, hasn't it? Yeah.
That's what it is. In the beginning of the community of Alcoholics Anonymous, the reason for anonymity wasn't not to tell someone you're an alcoholic. It was because they didn't have enough resources to handle all the people who had interest and wanted to be part of the community.
Is that right?
That was the reason for anonymity. And that's what it says in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I can show you all those places. But as you can hear, I'm kind of an anti-establishment type.
Well, you're certainly not anonymous, which I totally love about you.
I have no... What difference does it make?
Yeah.
I am who I am.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
you can call me what you want. And the word alcoholic is very simply a code word that connects the person who says it. I'm an alcoholic, you're an alcoholic. That simply means I'm allowed to be transparent with you, and you're allowed to be transparent with me. That we're not going to grade each other on the standards of exquisiteness that society has created. We get to be who we are, okay? And another definition for me for the word alcoholic, erasing political correctness. We've created a world of coldness, a standard of human interactivity that's so distant and so applauded that it's not okay to say hi to anybody.
Yeah.
If you say hi, what's wrong with you? Whoa, what do you want from me? So in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's very simple. I don't want anything from you. I want to be in the same space with you and hear what you have to say. And then in return, I get to tell you what I have to say. So what a wonderful community. So, that being said, the physical elimination of alcohol was paramount.
Yeah.
And I would hear people say it's not about not drinking. And I remember thinking, are you kidding? It's all about not drinking. Now, how to accomplish that? I happen to be one that drank the value out of drinking. So, and I made a commitment that I'm not going to drink anymore regardless. And that was my code word. Regardless of how I feel, regardless of how someone treats me, regardless of what's being said, regardless. Purely regardless, I'm not going to drink anymore. So that held me well. And then I was in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and it was my 19th month or so of sobriety. A kind gentleman by the name of Paul K. came over, tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, we're going to go through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a year-long commitment. It's in Laguna Beach, California, 4 hours every Saturday. Bring a big book, magic markers, and a notebook, and a 1935 dictionary so we can decipher the words, what they meant at that time. There were a group of us. An elderly woman, a set of twins, a Jewish American princess, a younger brother group from Colorado. And what ended up happening with that, going through the process of the 12 steps, was a verification that it's okay to be me. And I allowed everyone else to be them. And nothing was on the table as far as what you could say to each other. So being able to be transparent, and it verified what AA is, again, for me, another definition, to be able to reminisce with a stranger. You walk into any AA meeting and sit down and you know them, all because of the code word, alcoholic, right? So that doesn't minimize or dispel all of the functions of Alcoholics Anonymous. I happen to be one that gives the not drinking part priority and paramount because it allows everything else to occur.
I agree with you.
All right? So if that wasn't the case, then when turn it upside down, okay, it's not about not drinking. Why don't we go out and have a few drinks and take the steps? Read the book, talk to each other, have a few cocktails. That's what I did in the earlier days. Alcohol and the ceremonial use of alcohol connected me. Okay. Now, I don't need it. I need humanness, and that's what occurs here in an example sitting here right here with you. So, a big one for me is this. Having, how do you put it? With the medical community, which I don't quite understand or necessarily relate, but I'll leave the experts to the experts. To give someone drugs to get them off of drugs. We don't want you to be, we don't want you to drink anymore, so we'll give you this instead. Because of their physical requirements or your well-being or whatever the case may be, but the common agreement is that it's not okay to be natural. It's not okay to be uncomfortable. You have to have this, even though it'll be for a little while, and that little while turns into a long while, a long while, a long while. And we'll do the steps, we'll read the book, we'll do everything that we're told to do, and then we'll take a few little downers or whatever we have for our physical well. And all of that wrapped up to, I scratch my head and go, what really is going on here? What is it? We're going to change seats on the Titanic? You know, you're going to quit doing this, which is illegal, but you're going to do this, which is legal. But that's a personal editorial comment, which I still don't understand, that if you want to get off drugs, it's time to get off drugs. Okay. That being said, during the course of my sobriety, I've had the opportunity to see a number of different things occur regarding detox, the physical elimination of the drugs or the alcohol that's running through the system of a human being. I became aware of a non-medical detox that I have found to be phenomenal. So much so that there was a dear friend of mine. Quick background: I'm a TV host, infomercial host. I did a number of infomercials for a company that was a financial services company, and one of the employees became friends. We were, come 10 years later, turns out that it's time that he needs to stop drinking, the families and friends. So I introduced him to this process. Amazing. He's now sober over 100, 120 days. He is walking on clouds. He is so appreciative of what has occurred for him. And for that matter, I think you know him, and he says hello to you.
Thank you very
so
much.
I just, and he wanted to make sure that I said that.
Thank you.
But to watch the process, which is non-pharmaceutical, no drug, to be able to watch a person become clean in one day, you know, to go home tired and thirsty, it's phenomenal. So what can occur with that, it allows the cleanliness to where the spiritual and the emotional can take quicker hold. Instead of taking 30 days to detox, 60 days, 90 days, stay away from work, stay away from your friends. This procedure evidently allows for the immediate interactivity and back into the social life again. So, you know, that is being done as we speak, and I'm watching it occur, and you know, we can guide it to whomever might have an interest in something like that, following what we're doing here. So, are there any questions that you want to interrupt me for?
Let me just interact with the last part. Paul and I have been working together for the last 6-8 months with a local physician, Dr. Muran, on this detox method. Dr. Muran's background is as a doctor of functional medicine, so he's really what in the old days used to be called a holistic doctor. So he brings in mega vitamins, all kinds of natural resources to buttress somebody's hormones and their neurotransmitters and all the rest of that are non-pharmaceutical. And so he brought me in, and you can speak to your experience, he brought me in to consult with clients, including this one we're talking about, within the first week, within the first 10 days. There's a 10-day protocol. And what I was struck by was how quickly, and you know this from our conversations, how quickly, nearly immediately, I could have conversations with clients that are detoxing from, in this case, decades of alcohol use, how I can talk with them and have them be lucid, and just as you just said, be psychologically present, emotionally present, as well as spiritually vital, or at least returning to vitality again. I've been very struck by that. Paul knows this at this point because it's an old battle axe of mine. I don't know who to blame for this, but I'm a scientist by background in terms of my graduate training and so on. And so it's still early for me. 6 months is still early for me. And I've worked with about a half a dozen clients so far, but so far the results have been more positive than negative. It's not there's no magic bullet at all in this, and you know that as well as I, but working from the psychological perspective, which is what I do. And then Paul has been addressing the 12-step social support, wherever we want to call that, and I feel like our two work hand in hand, is that what we found is we found resources early on in recovery that are amazing. And then you have friends and acquaintances beyond this individual too, who have been really responsive and sustained that. And so it's hopeful to think that the only game in town is not just conventional medical approaches to detox, that something without introducing anything that's foreign or alien or pharmaceutical necessarily could get somebody stabilized. I'm happy because I really want people to work on the psychological precursors to their addiction, and I need access to that. And generally I have to wait for a good spell. And this procedure so far is promising.
Absolutely. You know, and the spiritual and the emotional connectivity that's afforded by the community of AA.
Yeah.
Okay. and the big book. What kind, wonderful people who took the time, I've got a couple of comments on that, to write that big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm very much involved, especially with the social interactivity.
Yeah.
I'm a GSR. I've been a Journal Service representative. I'm currently an intergroup representative. I've done a number of volunteering and outside of the meeting structure of Alcoholics Anonymous.
What is GSR? What does that mean?
General Service Representative.
What does that mean?
Well, a General Services representative is a member of each individual group, can be a General Service representative, and they meet once a month with, they have a group called the General Services, area, and that is the connectivity to New York.
Okay. And what's in New York?
In New York, a central office.
Okay.
New York is the worldwide office for Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay. Yeah.
So General Service Representative is a representative of the group who goes to the monthly meetings, who communicates with New York in that fashion.
Gotcha.
The intergroup rep is also a representative for an individual group that goes to monthly meetings for the connectivity with intergroup, which is the Orange County representation.
Okay, got it. So that's regional. That's Orange County. Okay.
Right, and the other one is national.
Got it. Got
Okay.
it. Thank you. Thank you.
So
you've been involved at all levels in that.
all the way down the line.
Yep.
Okay. Now, I had a phone call by accident, and I answered the phone. They were looking for someone else, and it was one from the organizational structures, someone who was in the know. And the way I am so inquisitive, I said, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it said 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly... I said, how many people really wrote that book? How many really? And how many have recovered? How many stayed sober? And I wasn't asking for argumentative, just out of curiosity. And we had a nice discussion, and the answer was, it doesn't make any difference. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous is a publication that sits there that connects mankind. So it doesn't make any difference who wrote it, who stayed sober, what's in there. It's one alcoholic interacting with another. Back down to the baseline of humanness and human interactivity. In the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, there are a few phrases that were very important to me. One is the step before the steps. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then are you ready to take these steps? Not when a treatment center tells you to, not when your friendly loved one tells you to, not when a sponsor tells you to. It's if you have decided you want what we have. And it doesn't seem that that's identical for all. Therefore, the element of time, being a participant in the community of Alcoholics Anonymous, is imperative to allow that to happen when the time is right. So
For you, you talked about drinking, the value out of drinking. I assume that you had come to that awareness before you began working in the steps, but I don't know.
Yes, I drank to where I didn't want to drink anymore. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I would state that. I don't know what you guys are doing here, but and I'd go home and I'd check off each day that I made it through the day, and I'd scratch my head and I'd go, son of a gun, I made it. I made it. And then I'd go to a meeting and I'd be told it's not about not drinking, and I'd go home and I'd check it off, and I made it. And, it's not about, it's not, it sure is for me, and then I was there involved long enough to where what's written in that book, if you've decided you want what we have, and Paul K. opened the door for me, and I said, yeah, I'm in. And that's exactly what occurred for me. I sponsor a number of people. Sponsorship is merely a relationship to where one human being shares with another. It's not a hierarchy. It's not placed on pedestal. It's purely another form of one human being interacting with another on an allowable, which I found allowable with everyone in AA, but maybe more of an allowable openness between two human beings. So I have one gentleman who just celebrated 10 years, another gentleman who we have a day apart birthdays. It's my 30th and it's his first. So I'm open to all of it. You know, I allow my fellow man to see the world. And here's what's nice about the time that I've spent in AA, what's occurred for me on an emotional and a spiritual basis. And here it is. Everybody's right. Even if I disagree with you, even if you see the world totally opposite of the way, you know what? I will support you to the ends of the earth, how you see the world. I will go with you and argue on your behalf, even though I don't agree with you, because that's how much I respect who has the answer for any of this.
You remind me of something I heard stated. It's the same thing, say it's slightly different. No one's smart enough to be 100% wrong. Which is to suggest there's a rightness in everyone's perspective. Paul, let me just interrupt for just a second. We have a couple of comments that have come here. Let me just glance at these for a second. I'm going to read the second one first and come to the first one second. The more recent one, this person says, I love the essence of AA, but I've found that it's so different from one meeting to another, how the individual groups feel. It's great to hear Paul talk about the spirit and some of the history of AA. Do you want to comment on any of that, Paul?
I'd love to, because that's right on. Alcoholics Anonymous is a spiritual program. Yeah. There is no question, no doubt. What goes on in any and every AA meeting is humans interacting with other humans to allow the heart to work. So all of the talk, what anybody's opinion is and the experiences being shared, it might feel good or whatever. Does it have any true substance for anything? Maybe, maybe not. But what it does do, it holds the attention to allow the heart to work. So it's certainly a spiritual program. And my favorite part of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous is the white part, the part between the words, the non-explainable, you know. And then to comment on as far as each Alcoholics Anonymous meeting is different, absolutely. The traditions of AA, the first tradition allows for that. Not only that, it mandates it. Every group can decide what their group is. If you have a group that doesn't want to allow vulgar language out of politeness, that decision can be made, and each individual that comes to the group respects the first tradition of that group. Another group may allow smoking or whatever the case may be, and this group may not. So each group, through the first tradition, is allowed to make their own decisions. But regardless of what the group is, what they're saying, what they're not saying, it's the spiritual energy that's sitting in that AA meeting that has support for me. And that's the way I see it.
You remind me of the first comment, so I'll just pick up on that. Jane asks, is the whole point giving this to God? Comments?
Boy, there you go. That's a wonderful discussion point for a person like I am. Here's a comment. If God was so interested in me not drinking, why did God make me an alcoholic? Isn't that kind of a cruel thing to do? I don't want you to drink, so I'm going to make you an alcoholic so you can. Here we go. My truth is this. There's certainly a God. Because taking a look at mankind and the value systems that we have in place, are you kidding? You know, the way we treat each other, what is valued as a general society as a whole, or on a worldly basis, how impolite, how inconsiderate, all the negative that seems to be applauded, I find to have no value. So if what mankind has set up as valuable that I find no value, what am I doing here? By default, there is certainly a God, without question. So that there is no doubt. So there, none whatsoever for me. Without question, there is a God.
If we thank you, if we bypass the question you raised, which is an age-old question about if God is so powerful and good, why do we suffer? That's like a long history, the problem of evil and philosophy and theology and so on. How about your thought, your truth? I like how you put it, your truth about this person's question about giving this to God, about giving this to God. Any comments on that? If the whole point is about giving this to God, presumably giving the addiction, giving the alcoholism to God?
I won't even try to speak to that, to say yes or no. The answer is very simply back to the question, the person who asked or brought up the point. Is the whole point giving this to God? In reverse, is the whole point giving this to God for you? If that is the case, the answer, 100%.
I love your answer.
That's it. Absolutely, without a doubt.
Have a Zen philosopher sitting next to me here. That's very good. and you know, it's funny is that might be question is being evasive by some, but I feel like that's actually the most direct answer. Is you're owning your truth, and I've known you for these years. That's all you've ever laid claim to. You don't lay claim to my truth or Odie's truth or Austin's truth or this questioner's truth. It's like the question is, okay, what does that mean to you, and what are you going to do with that? And you just answered her in the same spirit that you've always lived, is that you're invested in your own truth, and you'll allow me to be whoever I am. It's back to that point, everybody's right.
Everybody's right in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the commonality or the grading or the measurement is the elimination of alcohol. If it's not that being the case, why do we not celebrate spiritual growth, emotional well-being? Why don't we get a chip for 30 days of spiritual growth? I'm going to give you a chip for a year's worth of emotional well-being. You know, and speaking to that again, here's another example. This is how I see the world. Sitting in Alcoholics Anonymous, being sober, I guess I was sober 20 years or so, and all of a sudden, or it was a little bit less, 10, 15, and all of a sudden, here comes the list of a dry drunk. Here comes the characteristics. So no longer is it good enough to not drink. Now, we're going to make you what we've decided you're supposed to be. We're going to wrap that with kindness. But if you're not what we've decided you're going to be, something's wrong with you. Oh, you're a dry drunk. We've decided, see how we've graded you? And now guess what? You missed number one. So you better go home and work on that. When you're done, then you can come back. So we don't give chips for spiritual or emotional sobriety because we can't measure it. We can have our opinions of it. And it seems to me that quite often that opinion or grading is, have you come into the fold? Are you one of us? The way I'm one of you right out of the chute. There's nothing I need, and you're one of me right away. So there's really nothing to be done about it. It's a matter of sharing my truth with you and yours with me, and respecting each other for that. You know, the only caveat is that I don't step on anybody else's right to be wrong or right, in my opinion, and I respect the same for me. So we can do life together. How freeing is that?
There's something that you and I have in common. I love what you're saying. There's something you and I have in common, and I'll speak for myself, but I think this is part of my resonance. I can still remember the first time I heard you speak in a meeting, is that I'm not a joiner by nature, nor am I a conformist by nature, and sometimes that's been to a fault, and I'll own up to that. But the fact is if it's about joining a new club, I know all about clubs, and clubs aren't going to save me any more than the man on the moon. And I do know about conformity or accommodation, and that also hasn't served me. And something I've appreciated about you always is that you've been an advocate, even fiercely advocate, for people to be the individual that they are. And I think it's the nature. I was just talking to a friend about this today at lunch. 40 years ago, I was in college, and I was a double major in psychology and also religious studies, and I took an entire course on the development of the early Christian church. The whole course was on that, and how within a generation, less than a generation, the church moved from being a vital human organization, transparent, all of that, to being codified, contained, structured, and all of this. And I've taken that course over all these years. That's what happens to organizations if we're not real careful. Is that soon enough we're developing, well, you need to conform to this, and it's us against them, and so on like that. And that doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me. In fact, that actually is part of the problem that leads to my needing to self-medicate. I'd rather not go down that route. And as long as I've known you, you've been outspoken as no one but Paul Bartlau. And I love that about you, Paul.
There's the traditions were written to kind of hold the groups together. My observation and experience is also this. If a group is a spiritual entity, as it's professed to be in the community of AA, it grows.
Yeah.
If a group appears to be spiritual and have it going on and everything, and all of a sudden it wanes and it goes away, because it doesn't have the spiritualness that's required for the base of pure Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah, no, I really do agree with you. Really do. It's like time will tell, won't it? It's like if something is vital and alive, the universe supports that, and if it's death dealing, it'll take care of itself soon enough. Thank you very much. Don't have to worry about that.
Here, this is a good example that I like, so I repeat it often, so I'll repeat it right here. In my earlier sobriety, I was invited to a party from my daughter's school friends, very influential, very well-positioned family, and a number of adults sitting there having cocktails, etc., and I wasn't drinking. And this lady politely came over to me and she goes, "I noticed you don't drink. Why is that?" Right? And I sat there for a second. I like it so much, I repeat it often. I looked at her and I said, "Why don't we start with this? Why do you?" And then we can get to the point of why I don't. See, natural is so non-celebrated in this community of world, right? You've got to take the edge off. If you're uncomfortable, have a drink. Take the edge off. If you're excited too much, have a drink. Take the edge off. What I've come to find in the time of Alcoholics Anonymous, the edge is where life resides. The periods of discomfort that I've experienced on this planet without tempering with anything, the hurt, the almost unbearable hurt at times, for whatever reason, graded fair, unfair, or whatever. But to experience that to where time seems to go forever. Those periods of time, the other side of that, there's an appreciation of life that could never have been had unless that unfortunate, almost debilitating period of emotional hurt occurs.
Yeah, I love you saying that. Years ago, I used to have a plaque on my wall, and it was a saying by the Catholic priest Matthew Fox, who got excommunicated, by the way, became a priest in another tradition, I think. But he used to have this quote, and I don't remember it, and I've long since lost it or given it away. But the quote really touched on what you're talking about. He says, to the extent that we've been gouged out by life's darker side, the suffering, is the same extent to which we can experience the heights of joy and communion and so on. And I held that up there because I've always recognized the truth in that. It's what you're calling the edge. I'll get to that in just a second. It's that living edge, it seems like to me. And we live in a society that wants to round it off, shave it off, smooth it out, whatever like that. And I don't think I'm any more interested in that than you. I'm a human being. There are times that the pain, I just feel like, is it going to be bearable? I do this meditation. I'll share with you. This just happened last week. I do this meditation. I've practiced this mindfulness for about 40 years now. That's what I do. And one of the things I do is I'll just sit and I'll just see what it's like to sit with discomfort. This is last week's discomfort. I'd gone swimming in the morning and I'd forgotten to dry out my ears. And so I'm sitting and meditating, and I've got water right here in this left ear, and it starts to itch. Like I want to get the water out. And I thought, just as an experiment, I'm not trying to be a he-man, what would it be like just to sit with this and see how this goes? And so I was sitting there breathing, Paul, and the water in my ear is starting to itch worse and worse. It starts to kind of sting and burn. I thought, I'm good for this. There came a point, this is the only time I've ever experienced this in my life, there came a point at which I thought, if I let this go much further, I think I'm going to go mad. I really did think that. And you know what I did?
Yeah.
I and have mercy on my poor soul. Having said that, I think there's plenty of times that I do that prematurely or be tempted to. And you know what? I just as soon experience, if you tell me something sad, can I just be sad with you? I'd like to be sad. I don't really want to blunt that. If there's something you say that makes me nervous or makes me afraid, I want to feel that. And why do I want to feel that? I want the whole enchilada, and I know you do too. You're a vital person. In fact, I've shared this with people. One of my issues with the unfortunate use of the word sober, and it's just a personal thing for me. Sobriety is nothing I've ever aspired to. The idea of living soberly, if I think about how that word is used outside the context of addiction and alcoholism, I don't really care to be sober, thank you very much. And I'm a drummer.
Right.
And so I've thought my substitute for it is not a great alternative, but what I would like, I'd like vitality. I'd like a vital life. And I've come to equate that. So I'll actually use the term sober now. But what I mean by sober, you know, you have your little code words. What I mean by sober is being alive, is being edgy, is being wild, being fully alive. That's something I aspire to. And so I don't want to tone it down, thank you very much. I want to tone it up.
You know, there's...
this comment, and then we'll get to the question up here, but I want to hear from you.
Okay.
Yeah.
The discomfort of earlier sobriety that occurs, and this is an activity that I created for myself that I share with my fellows that worked for me.
Good.
Going shopping, park in the farthest parking spot, within reason, in the very farthest parking spot, consciously aware of that, okay, and then walk into the store and then buying your items or whatever the case may be, and then making sure to stand in the longest line.
I love you, Paul. That is fabulous.
And what that did for me...
What did it do for you, Paul?
It is a very good teacher of the pleasure of being.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
The pleasure of being.
Yeah.
You can't define it. You can't. It requires experience.
Yeah.
So the parking, the longest line, and over a period of time, what a gift it is to be alive. So that's
beautiful. I really do love that.
I like that one too.
I had a miniature version of that this morning. Is that in the morning I have this little quinoa porridge I have for breakfast. When I have my early morning quiet time, I start with porridge and I do the itching ear meditation. And I was sitting this morning and I was heating it up, and it was 30 seconds left on the microwave, and I just sat and I looked at that, and you know what I did is I just breathed. I didn't scurry around. I waited in that line and I breathed, and it could have been 3 hours. That'd have been fine. I was just, there's no place to go. Yeah. Like, what am I going? Like, shorter line? What do I want a shorter line? Let me check on this point up here. This person says this is for Paul. Thank goodness. I'm off the hot seat.
Good.
I notice so many people can't connect to the value of AA. I wonder what you say to people who might be helped by AA, but who can't see how to connect with it. Do you want to have any thought about that?
Boy, yeah. It's kind of like, how do you sell someone the desire to stop drinking, huh? How do you convince someone? You know, from where does that come? Now, the only thing that I can do, which I do often, is share my experience with those. It's kind of like when people say, you have to go to those meetings? Have to? I want to. What are you talking about? I get to.
Yeah.
Okay, because the human connectivity that's created by having a group of people sitting around for a period of an hour with nothing to check off, no goal to attain, no applaud to have, a place to be. So, if that would sound interesting as far as unlike any club or institution that airs on this planet, then my suggestion is to share that with whomever it might benefit and go with them. You know, and then allow them to be who they are within the confines of it, or in the context of an AA meeting.
What is the phrase? Attraction
rather than promotion.
Yeah, is that it's about attraction. And I like very much what you're saying. You get to, you want to.
I get
versus
to.
I have to.
Yeah. How long do you have to go to those meetings? What do you mean have to go to those meetings? See, the misunderstanding as if it's going to getting those whips by the whip for a period of time, kind of like the court system, you know, has created that type of a feel. You have to go to 30 meetings instead of you get to go. you know? And that kind of carries over, and that's the lie of humanity. You know, that's the way I see it, and all of a sudden it gets legs, and all of a sudden nobody knows what really goes on in there, and who wants to go when you're not.
Yeah. I don't know why it just popped in my mind. The story out of Tom Sawyer, where he's painting the white fence. And no one wants to do it. And pretty soon he has people paying him because they want to paint the white fence. I think that's brilliant. You know, right before I came in here today, I was leading a group at Beginnings. Beginnings is a sponsor of our weekly podcast here. And I was sitting with a group of men and women, and our very last conversation was pertinent to this. Somebody was talking about, I said, we were talking about the value of 12-step groups. I was thinking of our meeting today, and I said, any challenges in going to 12-step groups? And one person got up and he was getting ready to leave the group, and he said, kind of like, how long do I have to do this, or why do I have to do this? And I said, you raise a really good question. And I want to ask you guys, is that, of course, there's a lot of responsibility. These guys, by definition, are all in early recovery. But I said, is it possible to hold the responsibility or the seriousness of early recovery? These are people that have lost friends to alcohol and other drugs and so on. And some of them have been brought back from death themselves. Is it possible to hold that seriousness and still have fun? It led to a really rich conversation. Is the ones in there that could bear witness to it are deeply committed to their sobriety, to their recovery, and they're tasting life. They're enjoying life. And I said, I don't know how you get around this in other way, because if this is just, like you said, whips, if this is just self-flagellation, who can sustain that? You've got to find some way to go east on a westbound train. You got to find some way to hold what look like apparent opposites that aren't, which is that I'm deadly serious about my recovery and I'm fully alive and I'm going to laugh my head off.
You know, a very important part, there's two of them. One is the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous is Dr. Bob. And Dr. Bob's story starts on page 171 and ends on page 181 in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know how it's occurred, but everyone seems to parrot the programs in the first 164 pages. How can that be when Dr. Bob's story doesn't start on page 171? Right. Without two of them, they would never have evolved into the community that we have today. Dr. Bob's sobriety date is June 10th. That's the date that the birth of Alcoholics Anonymous is celebrated. Not Bill's birthday, which was 6 months previous, Dr. Bob's birthday. Now, an important one on Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob on page 181 tells the world, I wanted to drink for 2.5 years and didn't. How did he do that? He did it with one alcoholic interacting with another. So the not drinking as a platform, which allows everything else to occur however it might occur. So that being said, the fifth tradition, the long form of the fifth tradition, which is not what's on the walls in AA meetings, but the long form of the fifth tradition is each Alcoholics Anonymous group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose, that of carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers, the spiritual message, not to the methodology, the language of the heart, and that is not written on the and never really discussed. So the long form of the fifth tradition is very important to a personality like I am.
Yeah. You remind me of a passage out of the Hebrew Bible in the book of Jeremiah where it says, there'll come a day where the law is no longer written on tablets of stone, methods, what you just call methods. There will come a day where the law is no longer written on tablets of stone, but on the human heart. And that's where the transformation is. And you've got that, Paul, in spades. It's in psychology, we call it emotional contagion. But I think for our purposes, let's call it spiritual contagion. Is that fair?
Let's. Okay. I'm good. You can call me whatever you want. Just don't call me late for lunch.
We're going to wind down in just a minute. I want to thank all of our listeners. I'm really grateful for your presence. I'm most grateful for Paul for your huge presence. It's a beautiful thing. Do you have any final comments, questions? I used to, my first year in graduate school, which started 40 years ago, my statistics instructor, we had 8 hours of statistics for a year every Thursday. And at the end of those 8 hours, Chuck Wallace would say, any questions, any Any criticisms? Any witticisms? Paul, any criticisms? Any witticisms?
No criticisms whatsoever, just a sincere appreciation to spend time with you and everyone here in this production, and what a gift it is, and dot, dot, dot,
and dot, dot, dot.
more to come.
More to come, more to come. The medium is the message right here, you guys. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Odie, for hosting us today. I hope you all found value in today's presentation. We'll be coming back next week, and our topic will be losing ourselves in addiction, finding ourselves in recovery. And speaking of dot, 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 there's more to follow with that conversation. If you have any final questions for Paul, you're welcome to reach out to Austin and Odie through the Facebook group, Ask an Addiction Specialist, also through YouTube. Also, you can just write me directly at my website, which is my name, drbobweathers.com. You can just write me a question, and I'll be happy to get back to you this week. And if it's something for Paul, I'll be happy to pass along to Paul, because I see Paul frequently. Thank you all for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Blessings to all. Take good care.